Hey everybody, welcome into the back room. I'm Andy Ostroy. We have Virginia Congressman James Walkinshaw with us today. We'll chat with him in just a little bit. But first, thanks for tuning in. We appreciate you listening, and we'd love to hear your comments. So email us at backroomandy@gmail.com and or post on our social media, and we'll read some feedback next time. And if you like the podcast, please rate and review and follow or subscribe, and you'll be notified every time we post a new episode. All right, so let's get into the big things of this week. I mean, this was a pretty busy, crazy week. Now, I want to start off with Epstein because today is the 30th day in the 30-day deadline that is mandated by the Epstein Transparency Act that was passed by Congress in a pretty significant bipartisan way a month ago. And today is the deadline for the Department of Justice to release the full Epstein files. It's a deadline. It's not like the clock starts today. They've had up to 30 days to release the full files, with the exception of something that could be redacted if it pertained to the victims and the survivors, which is totally understandable. Now, there are loopholes in the law. And one of the loopholes is that if there is an active investigation taking place, then the Department of Justice can use its discretion not to release anything that would be part of that investigation. We all know that Donald Trump launched these bogus investigations into Adam Schiff and other people. And I'm sure the motivation was partly to have this loophole in their pocket. And the other thing that's notable is that there was also a subpoena that was filed by Congress at the same time. And the subpoena does not have the same loopholes. So one way or another, these files have to be put out by the Department of Justice. So they can hide behind a loophole under the law, but they can't hide behind the same loopholes under the subpoena. But what happened this morning is Deputy AG Todd Blanche came out and said, we're going to put out hundreds of thousands of documents. And then he said, there's also hundreds of thousands of documents we're not going to put out. Maybe we'll put them out later. But that's not what the law says. The law says all of it has to be put out by today. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens. I'm not sure how much power or control or influence Democrats in Congress have, but we'll see.
I mean, the thing is, when you say the law says, this administration is completely lawless. So I don't know what that holds them to.
I don't know who enforces things. I
mean, it's
the
the
accountability.
Justice Department generally.
And they care because why?
You don't trust Pam Bondi?
I mean, she's smoking hot, but no.
Well, then I guess nothing happens.
Yeah, that's the problem. You know, I say this all the time. We have a sociopath in the White House. Worse, we have a Department of Justice that is totally in the pocket of the sociopath. You know, we have a corrupt administration. We have a Department of Justice that rubber stamps the corruption. This is a first for us in our history. Usually, if something bad happens in this country, it's like, well, the Department of Justice is going to open an investigation and, you know, bring the criminals to justice.
You mean like Tish James and Comey?
Yeah, I mean, look, Matty, I know you're joking, but there is a very serious mortgage fraud epidemic in this country right now. There are people inadvertently benefiting by hundreds of dollars in tax breaks. And we have to put an end to this.
Immediately. Apparently Donald Trump did.
This real estate lawlessness.
He wrote the book on real estate lawlessness.
I did.
Now, look, Donald Trump literally has done the exact same thing on his mortgages.
Yep.
But that's different, Matty. It's different.
Completely.
Totally different. You know that, Jen, right?
Of course.
Yeah.
Who doesn't?
So there's been a new photo dump this week. There was like 68 new photos of Epstein and his ilk and his residences. And, you know, one of the things that really popped off the pages is all the references on these photos and stuff to Lolita, the 12-year-old girl who was the subject of many a man's sexual fantasies and sexual indiscretions. It's disgusting. It is just absolutely disgusting. And so I continue to believe that Epstein is an existential crisis for Trump and this administration, and probably a whole fuckload of rich, powerful Republicans who are friends with him, which is why he's fighting like an animal to keep this stuff secret. But we'll see. I think the power and the momentum behind the survivors, these survivor sisters who are so brave in pushing for accountability and justice, that's not going away. Another thing in the news this week, Susie Wiles, chief of staff. And the reason she's in the news this week is that there was this incredible bombshell story in Vanity Fair that broke, where she did a series of 11 interviews. But when this story first broke, I was like, what the fuck? What is she doing? She said like really awful things. She said that Trump has the personality of an alcoholic. She said that J.D. Vance is a conspiracy theorist, that Pam Bondi totally fucked up on Epstein. I mean, like a lot of stuff about key people in the administration. And if she's so smart and so calculating and so disciplined, then there must have been a reason why she did all this, no?
Yes. I really think that there was a reason.
I'm going with no. I'm going with she is not really attuned to the way real media works, and that she was so enamored of being talked to all the time by this reporter that she just had no idea that everything you say to a reporter is written down. If it's not on background, it's going to be in the story. And she was convinced this was a book about her because he had previously written a book about chiefs of staff, and she just blabbed. She's just a blabber.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think she was like, oh my, Vanity Fair.
Yes, exactly.
How many times? 11? Wow. She was seduced.
Completely.
Happens all the time. Happens all, I mean, Bob
Especially
Woodward
if you're
is a master at that.
Well, especially if you're as unsophisticated as I believe she is.
Yeah. Let's play this clip because the people she talked about, as well as others, there was like uniform support for her, almost like effusive praise, like over the top praise and support for her, as if like in a military way, they just were ordered to.
You know why I really love Susie Wiles? Because Susie is who she is in the president's presence. She's the same exact person when the president isn't around. Susie Wiles, we have our disagreements. We agree on much more than we disagree, but I've never seen her be disloyal to the president of the United States, and that makes her the best White House chief of staff that I think the president could ask for.
This is, unfortunately, another example of disingenuous reporting, where you have a reporter who took the chief of staff's words wildly out of context. Many people in this building spoke with that reporter, and those comments were never included in the story, probably because it didn't push this false narrative of chaos and confusion that the reporter was clearly trying to push.
Well, okay, so the first person you heard was Vice President J.D. Vance, who she attacked in this piece. The second was White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt. Those lips. Those lips. You know, taken out of context, J.D. Vance is a conspiracy theorist. Donald Trump has the personality of an alcoholic. How are those things taken out of context? They are so lame when they try to beat back criticism or any bad news.
I think the important thing is that nothing they said denied the statements that were in the article. There was no denials, which means it was verbatim. And we know that the reporter recorded all the 11 hours of interviews with Susie, as well as the other interviews he did.
When someone says you have the personality of an alcoholic, not a compliment.
You guys don't think this was leaked on purpose? You don't think that, you think that she was seduced? You don't think that there was any planning in this whatsoever? I disagree with you.
There's a part of me, Jen, that thinks she's at the fuck it stage of her tenure. I really do. But I agree with Matty too, and we don't know. I think both scenarios are plausible.
The reason why I think that scenario is less plausible is this was over 11 months. If this was in the last month or two and she's like, oh my God, the administration's falling apart, he's disintegrating, I better do this interview.
Well, we don't know what she said at the early interviews versus what she said recently.
It's pretty clear that she started 11 months ago, and if she continued for those 11 different interviews, it was all in the context of her wanting to get herself in a book about things. It doesn't plausible.
The argument could be made that it started out as a puff piece. She was flattered with Vanity Fair, and the more she got into it, and the more she became comfortable with the writer, and the more she let her guard down, and the more chaotic over time the first year has become, she just started talking more freely than perhaps she did at the beginning. But it's hard to imagine that she doesn't pay a price for this.
Yeah, I don't think she will.
I don't think she will either.
Yeah, he needs her.
Don't we have a bet?
We have a bet about
this?
We have a bet that she's gone in, I said, what, 60 days?
You lost
said
the
March
by
March 1st.
Maddie, we don't talk about my losing bets.
Okay, so we've got that, and Matt and I both think that she's going to last.
She's
going to
totally last. I don't see her leaving. And if she does leave, it'll be because she wants to, not because she's pushed out.
She wants to.
No, I mean, if she wants to.
How are we
going to
know that?
Well, we wouldn't, but I don't think she's going to leave.
You're already couching your loss?
No, she's not. She is not leaving. This woman won the election for Trump. He is dedicated to her. She is incredibly important, even though I don't know what the fuck she does.
You mean Susie Trump?
He never. Trump. You're right. He never turns on people who really helped him. Marjorie Taylor Greene.
She's nuts.
All right, so I think it's just continuing to get worse and worse for Donald Trump. I think there's an inflection point here that we haven't seen before. This Epstein situation for him is really problematic. This week we saw a flurry of distractions. Again, he's running in 2028. That came up again. He's invading Venezuela. He did this speech the other night. And then there was this Rob Reiner thing. You know, Rob Reiner and his wife Michelle got murdered. We learned of that over the weekend. And he posted this just god-awful, unconscionable, hideous, I mean, it's showing such depravity and such a lack of humanity, compassion, and empathy for the family. And so all of these things on some level to me were distractions. And he can't outrun the Epstein shitstorm. It is a giant boulder rolling down a hill, and he's going to get flattened by it. And the thing with Rob Reiner is that we also had the mass shooting at the Hanukkah celebration in Australia. We had the shooting at Brown University. All of these things happened in the span of like 24 hours. Mm-hmm. And this maniac comes out like he's enjoying the pain and suffering of people. And it broke through. It broke through in a way that really brought on condemnation from a lot of Republicans and Trumpers in the media. You know, it was kind of surprising to see how many people on the right just unequivocally condemned it, including Marjorie Taylor Greene. I do think he jumped the shark on this one. The confluence of all these things happening at once, when the nation really was suffering and in pain and grieving all this violence everywhere, he just like opens the can of gasoline and throws it right on the flames.
It's disgusting.
The truth is he's a lame duck. He's a lame duck who's starting to get pushback from Congress. He continues to lose in the courts. Part of his base is turning on him. He's lost Marjorie Taylor Greene. He's lost the independents. He's lost the bros, the young men who voted for him. He's lost Hispanics. He's in trouble, and they're all lining up for 28. They're all trying to get themselves prepared for 26. We saw this week New York's Congressman Mike Lawler and 3 other Republicans went against the White House and signed the discharge position to extend the Obamacare subsidies. Something's happening. Let's play Marjorie Taylor Greene.
Returned one of President Trump's executive orders, which enabled him to fire federal workers. We also saw Indiana Republicans vote against redistricting. He didn't call any of them traitors and call for primaries against them. But I would like to say that that is a sign where you're seeing Republicans, they're entering the campaign phase for 2026, which is a large signal that lame duck season has begun and that Republicans will go in all in for themselves in order to save their own reelections.
She's a smart woman. I don't discount anything she says. I don't think she's just a scared little Georgia church mouse who's running back home because politics got too ugly for her. No, pay attention to what this woman does. Pay attention to what she says, because I think she's got her ear to the ground in a way that most other people in Trump's orbit don't. All right, let's get to the winners and losers.
My winner, Ahmed Al-Ahmed, the Muslim fruit shop owner who ran into danger on Bondi Beach to take away the gun from one of the shooters. And I think that it's a good time to never forget that the world is filled with brave and decent people. My loser, science. As the Trump administration dismantles NCAR, we all lose scientific understanding about our planet, including meteorology, climate science, and the impact of weather and science on our environment and society.
My winner is Mark Guiducci, the recently named editorial director of Vanity Fair. His choice of Christopher Anderson to shoot the White House portraits of the Trump administration was a stroke of genius. My loser is the country. It is no longer a serious place. Trump's turned a hallway in the West Wing colonnade into what he calls a presidential walk of fame. In reality, it's little more than his most unhinged Truth Social post bound together and bronzed.
I was going to have Marjorie Taylor Greene as my winner, but you're right, Jen, about Ahmed. And more importantly, what you said about there is good in this world and there's good people in this world. And we got to stay focused on that, because if we don't, we're going to go crazy. My loser, New York City Mayor-elect Zohran Mamdani, whose director of appointments, Catherine Almonte da Costa, resigned just one day after she was hired because the Anti-Defamation League resurfaced anti-Semitic social media posts she made over a decade ago. Things like money-hungry Jews, shaking my head. Far Rockaway train is the Jew train. Now, this one I take personal offense at because I grew up in Far Rockaway. Far Rockaway is a good Jewish place. If any of my Far Rockaway pals, Rich, Glenn, Mike, Petey, my Far Rockaway boys, you know what I'm talking about. Anyway, not a good start for the incoming mayor, who already was the subject of concern within much of the Jewish community. And that gets us to the weekly rant. So, a little over a week ago, Donald Trump held a rally in Pennsylvania, which was supposed to be an opportunity for him to reconnect with his base and demonstrate that he understands the economic challenges they're facing. He failed miserably then. And he did the same thing this week in his much-hyped 18-minute primetime address to the nation. The truth is, Trump is incapable of delivering the kind of speech he needed to deliver this week. He wasn't understanding. He wasn't reassuring. He didn't speak to the affordability concerns of voters. He didn't acknowledge their economic struggles, nor did he address in meaningful, tangible terms what he's doing to improve their lives. What he did do was pat himself on the back. It was all about him, because it's always all about him. His speech was loud. His speech was a loud, angry, defiant, defensive, lie-filled, hyper-partisan, tone-deaf, rapid-fire tirade delivered by an insecure, out-of-touch, unhinged narcissist desperate for attention, credit, and validation. And once again, he insulted his base by telling them they're too stupid to understand how great they have it. Who are you going to believe, me or your lying grocery bills? The speech was a mini State of the Union. He might as well have said, "Here I am, folks, and I'm doing fantastic. Here's my massive accomplishments, and you should be thrilled about all the money you're making and how little you're spending on everything, all because of your favorite president, me." Trump needed to have his Bill Clinton "I feel your pain" moment. Instead, he had "you have no pain" moment. It was the kind of speech that left his handlers, congressional Republicans, and the party terrified, because the economy is struggling. Inflation has increased every month for the last 5 months, and unemployment is the highest it's been in years. The working and middle class is growing angrier each week, yet all he can offer is, "It's Biden's fault." The speech was a gift to Democrats, who, with an eye on next year's midterms, are fired up and anticipating a blue wave pickup of perhaps 40 to 60 House seats and maybe even a Senate flip. And Trump is helping them so much he should be on the DNC payroll. Next month marks the 1-year anniversary of Trump's term. And whether he likes it or not, this is his economy. And he has no one to blame but himself for his broken promises, such as the hyperbolic, grandiose, unrealistic promises he made to, quote, end inflation and bring down grocery, healthcare, and other costs quickly, even on, quote, day one. Trump is drowning politically. His approval has sunk to 36%. And when it comes to his signature issues of crime, immigration, and the economy, he is significantly underwater, and he's dragging the party down with him. MAGA is in a state of turmoil, and the once iron grip he had on his base and Congress is slipping. As Marjorie Taylor Greene said this week, the dam is breaking. All right, let's get to Congressman James Walkinshaw. He represents Virginia's 11th Congressional District and serves on the House Oversight and Government Reform Committee and its Military and Foreign Affairs Subcommittee, focusing on protecting the nonpartisan civil service, supporting fair pay for federal employees, and holding the administration accountable. He also serves on the House Homeland Security Committee and both its subcommittees on Homeland Border Security and Enforcement and Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Protection. Congressman, welcome into the back room.
Thanks for having me. Excited to be here.
So let's start with the Epstein situation. There's a deadline today for the Department of Justice to release the full Epstein files under the new law that was passed recently. The breaking news this morning is that Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche announced that the department will release hundreds of thousands of documents, but there will be hundreds of thousands of documents that won't be released. So what's happening here? And more so, what do we do now? What will Congress do? What can Democrats do in response?
Well, the law is very clear. Law passed by Congress, signed into law by President Trump. Today is the deadline for the Department of Justice to release all of the files with obviously information related to survivors and victims redacted. And I certainly can understand and appreciate that there's a lot of work that needs to go in to ensure that, all those redactions are made. But they've had a lot of time here. And if they didn't feel like they could meet the legal deadline, they should have shared that information with Congress days or weeks ago. To learn today, the day of the deadline, that they're not going to be meeting the letter of the law is deeply, deeply disturbing and troubling. I think it's going to add to the feeling that the American people have, very understandably, that there's been a cover-up going on here. One thing that's important to note, in addition to the legal requirement created by the law that was passed, the Department of Justice is also under subpoena to the Oversight Committee, a subpoena that predates the discharge petition and President Trump signing the Release the Files bill into law. That subpoena is still in effect. That subpoena does not allow for the redaction of information that's relevant to quote unquote ongoing investigation, as the law does. So on the Oversight Committee, we as Democrats, and I would hope in a bipartisan way, are going to continue to press for full compliance with that subpoena and with the law.
Well, I ask you this as a frustrated Democrat. I know there's a ton of us out there. And I also ask this knowing full well that our party is the minority party and that the Department of Justice is the police here. And who's going to police the police if the police are not doing what they need to do to obey the law? So with that as a setup, they're basically saying we're not doing. It doesn't matter. We don't law schma, right? That's what's happening. Is there nothing that could really be done right away? Is there a suit that can be brought? Is there something that can compel them to follow the law? Because, as you said, this is a deadline. It's not the clock starts ticking today. It's today we're supposed to be the full release. There's no tomorrow. And so we're just seeing more of a skirting of the law by this administration.
Well, in terms of the tools that Congress has to enforce the law, and obviously, you've touched on kind of fundamental challenge in our structure that even the founders identified. Obviously, contempt is an option that Congress has. We can vote to hold an individual in contempt. There have been times in the past where, Congress has explored exercising its authority to detain individuals that violate the law. There's a constitutional debate about that. But I think what we as Democrats are going to do is continue to lay out and articulate that, look, in this administration, for folks who violate the law, perhaps they can get away with it for the remainder of President Trump's term. But there will be accountability for everyone in the Trump administration who has violated the law at some point in the future. And if Democrats have a majority in the House and or Senate in the future, we'll have a broader suite of tools to ensure that those who have violated the law or those who continue to violate the law are held accountable. But I think now, look, I think for the Trump administration to continue delay releasing these files, I think it's going to continue to damage them in the eyes of the American people, including a lot of their own supporters who were, to their credit, early in advocating to have full transparency around the Epstein files. So I don't think they're doing themselves any favors here. We on the Oversight Committee as Democrats have been focused on and guided by what we have heard from the survivors of Epstein's crimes who want to have full transparency, some of them hoping to get to, some kind of closure on this terrible episode that they were victimized by Epstein and others. And we're going to continue to push and push and push with every legal mechanism that we have.
It's hard to escape the reality of this situation when you ask, why isn't Donald Trump, why isn't Pam Bondi, why isn't the Department of Justice releasing these files? This is something they all have campaigned on for years. This is something that was promised. This was something that they said existed. There's a deep state cabal of rich, powerful, elite Democrat pedophiles engaged in this sex trafficking ring. Just put us back in power and we will bring it all down. We will bring down the deep state, blah, 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 blah. They get all the power. He claims he's personally innocent, that they have nothing to hide. Why not release the files then?
I mean, I think you nailed it, Andy. And I think it's instructive, to understand this dynamic within the MAGA, sphere, to think back to QAnon and Pizzagate conspiracies, right? Both of which, in a lot of ways, helped to fuel Donald Trump's rise, certainly online. And each of those were conspiracy theories, or unfounded conspiracy theories, it's important to note, but conspiracy theories about a cabal of wealthy, elite, largely Democrats who were preying on children. And it was so pervasive, right, and so depraved and so widespread that the only way we could stop it is to have a hero, strongman figure like Donald Trump, right, who could come in and wipe it all out in a way that, weaker Republicans couldn't. And that whole persona, right, that kind of mythical persona of Donald Trump was significant in his rise for a lot of folks. And the problem for him with this story is all of that has been punctured, right? Not only is Donald Trump not the hero in this story, unable to break up the cabal that preyed on children, but seemingly he knew a lot more about it than he wants us to know. And I think if you look at the timeline, right, he campaigned on release the files, release the files, release the files. He gets into the White House for the second time, and they make a big show that they're releasing the files. Remember, they had those binders. They came out in front of the White House with the binders of the list
Phase
and the
one.
files. Mm-hmm. That's right. And then we know, and it's been widely reported, right, that Attorney General Bondi told him that he's in the files. Mm-hmm. And we had now recently learned with Susie Wiles in the Vanity Fair interview that, he's in the flight logs and in the files in other ways that would be embarrassing to him that if they were released. So we know why he has done everything possible to prevent these files from getting out. We don't know the full extent of it. And that's what we need to learn. And look, it's not just about Donald Trump. Our view as Democrats in Congress is the investigation should lead wherever it leads. And we're going to follow every lead that comes to us, whether it's a prominent Democrat or prominent Republican. But Donald Trump's the person with the power to release the files who has refused and continues to refuse to fully release the files.
Yeah, we have to hope that there's enough people out there in MAGA, certainly among independents who he's really losing big time with, but that there's enough people in MAGA who are scratching their heads and going, if he's innocent and he has nothing to hide, and he could fulfill the biggest campaign promise he's ever made to us and make his base thrilled, and he can do what he's trying to do, which is to throw Democrats in jail like James Comey and just James and why not do it? I'm asking as if I'm MAGA. What would be the reason he's not going to make me happy by doing this? And I hope some of them are finishing that sentence by, oh my God, maybe he's not so innocent.
That's right. And look, Donald Trump is someone who, if he understands anything, he understands media cycles and the way that scandals work in the media. And what has happened over the course of this year has been a drip, drip, drip of bad story after bad story after bad story where he's taken hits. And he knows that. He understands that. The smart thing to do for him would be to just release the files, get it out there, get it behind you, and move on. Why hasn't he done that? Why instead is he willing to endure this constant drip, drip, drip of bad news as recently as today, where they're still refusing to release all the files?
Yeah, and speaking of drip, 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 so about a week ago, your committee released some of the 95,000 photos. Right. Yesterday, there was more photos that were released. Are there any of those photos that stand out to you as being particularly insightful or incriminating on any level?
Well, look, I think the photos confirm what we knew and maybe strengthen what we knew. Epstein's relationships with wealthy and powerful men, Democrats and Republicans, right? Donald Trump in a couple of the photos, at least one of which I think had been released publicly in the past. But the challenge with the photos is, we don't have the context. And it's not that Oversight Democrats haven't released the context. It's that, we're getting these photos from the Epstein estate and we're getting photos. And the context, including dates, when they were taken, who took them, what was taking place when they took them, a lot of that context will be in the DOJ files, right? So I think when the DOJ files and the photos that the Oversight Committee has received are put together, we'll have a better understanding of what they mean.
To me, when I saw the Trump condoms photo, that kind of made me go, okay, why would, if they're not that close and they weren't, sort of partners in alleged crime, what was that all about? And then you see the references to Lolita in the dump yesterday in a lot of the photos. Right. And then the dental chair, which is just horrifying, especially when you see the masks of men on the wall in that room. When you see all this stuff and then you take everything that we know so far, it's kind of obvious why these files haven't been released. Like if you ask, what is he hiding? The answer is, duh, right? Why else would he be fighting like an animal to keep these things private?
Yeah, I think, if you piece together all of the things we know, and in addition to the photos, several weeks ago, we released some emails from Jeffrey Epstein, including emails saying, Trump, quote, knew about the girls and, quote, spent several hours with one of the girls. I think the New York Times reporting this week, documenting not just the length of Trump's relationship with Epstein, but the depth of that relationship. Some folks even described them as best friends, and it was clearly a relationship based on, their mutual interest in sexual pursuit and sexual exploitation. And that went on for a long time. It gets very difficult to believe that through all of those years, Donald Trump didn't know that Jeffrey Epstein was trafficking underage girls. And we know at least one, and according to the New York Times, perhaps another, were trafficked from Mar-a-Lago.
Right.
From Mar-a-Lago. So at a minimum, Donald Trump needs to explain how is it possible for him not to have known that Epstein was trafficking underage girls. I find it hard to believe.
Well, on that note, your committee, led by Chairman James Comer, has issued subpoenas for Bill and Hillary Clinton. They were supposed to appear this week. They had a funeral, so it's been postponed to January. He has threatened contempt if they fail to show up. How is it that Donald Trump hasn't been subpoenaed or asked to appear before the committee? Based on what you just said and the obvious that we all know. What has Hillary Clinton got to offer the committee that Donald Trump wouldn't?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And first, let me just say, my view and Democrats' view is anyone who has information that could be relevant to the investigation should come in and sit down and talk to us. And it's been reported that the Clintons and Chairman Comer have been in communication for months, and the possibility of them, providing a sworn statement has been discussed. So I think that will get resolved. But your point is absolutely right. What does Hillary Clinton have to do with this? Zip, zero, zilch, nada, nothing. And I think Chairman Comer and the Republicans reveal the partisan approach they take to this by trying to drag her into it. And I think your point, and I've said this, is absolutely a good one. We should be talking to anyone who has information that's relevant to the investigation. Our investigation has determined that Donald Trump has information that's relevant. Maybe Jeffrey Epstein was lying in the email when he said Trump knew about the girls, but anyone conducting an investigation would want to ask Donald Trump, why did Jeffrey Epstein say you knew about the girls? Did you know about the girls? I think that's an obvious kind of next step in terms of investigation. Obviously, I don't expect the Republicans to go that route. And by the way, Congress has subpoenaed presidents of the United States before. It sometimes creates a constitutional debate, but in my view as a member of Congress, we absolutely have the authority to subpoena the president of the United States.
Yeah, Bill Clinton testified. He did it, from the White House, I believe, and he did it, privately, but you're 100% right. I want to ask you about immigration. Last week, there was a House Homeland Security Committee hearing. HHS Secretary Kristi Noem testified, but she left before you could question her. Talk about the delays in disaster relief that you spoke of at the hearing, as well as the funneling of taxpayer funds to her friends and allies and the $220 million that she spent on promoting herself and her own image.
Yeah, and first on the hearing, and I don't want to sound like too much of an insider here talking about hearings and how long people participate in a hearing. Secretary Noem tapped out of the hearing after 2 hours. So a lot of members, myself and Republicans, Democrats, didn't get to question her. We were talking about Hillary Clinton. I once watched Secretary Clinton testify before Congress for 11 hours. I don't think she took a bathroom break in 11 hours.
Yeah, Benghazi.
And Secretary Noem kind of came in pretty low energy and left after 2 hours. I think what I articulated in the hearing is we've seen Secretary Noem and the Department of Homeland Security under her leadership be very slow when it comes to getting relief to communities that have experienced a disaster, right? We saw this in the wake of the floods in Texas, where the bureaucracy and red tape that she put in place delayed life-saving resources. We've seen this across the country. Even one of the Republicans in the hearing complained to her about her department being slow to reimburse a locality in his district. So she's been very slow in doing that part of the job. But she was incredibly fast at spending $220 million to produce an advertising campaign which largely is designed, and if you watch some of the advertisements, they're promoting her. They're 1-minute advertisements, and it's 45 seconds, which are clearly Kristi Noem for President 2028 ads, and then 15 seconds, trying to tell folks who are undocumented to leave the country or not to come into the country. So it's a problem on its face that's how taxpayer dollars are being spent to promote herself. But perhaps the bigger problem, I think this is an emerging scandal. It's clear now, and ProPublica has done great reporting on this, that money, $220 million, $143 million, I think is the number of it, was routed through a secretive Delaware shell company that was just created for this purpose, routed through that Delaware shell company, and much of it, we don't know exactly how much, ended up in the pockets of a firm called the Strategy Group, which is led by folks who are her very close personal and political allies, Republican operatives, very close to her chief spokesperson in the department, very close to Corey Lewandowski. And the thing that's even stranger is she did precisely the same thing with precisely the same firm as governor of South Dakota. In 2023, according to officials in her administration, she steered an $8.5 million state contract to this same firm. So, the Democrats and Ranking Member Thompson and Garcia have launched an investigation, written to her, requesting documents, written to the Inspector General, asking for an independent investigation of this. I think even folks in the Trump administration are frustrated with her. One was quoted in Politico saying there's, quote, something fishy going on with the money at DHS. So I think this is a story that we're going to be hearing more about. And look, the American people deserve to know how their money are being spent. And there's some fishy stuff going on from my perspective.
Yeah, and there is chatter that Trump is not happy with her and that she may be gone next month. You see it as a likely scenario?
It's hard to say. Certainly there's real frustration with her. Trump seems to have taken the approach in this term that no matter what, he doesn't want to fire a cabinet secretary.
Right.
He did it in the first term, and I think he's decided it demonstrates weakness, or lets, the Democrats get a win or something. So seemingly there's no level of incompetence, no level of corruption, no level of self-dealing that could cause a cabinet member to be fired, as long as they continue to show up at the cabinet meetings and tell Donald Trump that he's the greatest leader in the history of the human species, right? That seems to be the only remaining job criteria for them.
But what do you think happens as his approval continues to tank, as he continues to lose everywhere? We know that Donald Trump never likes to accept blame, so he's got to blame somebody else at some point, because the situation for him right now is a bleak one. So at some point, there has to be blame. There's going to be a moment where somebody gets blamed. If it's not him, who is it?
Yeah, I think that's a great point. I mean, he was quoted this week basically, setting the stage to lose the midterms. He, said presidents, even when they're doing a great job like I am, usually lose in the midterm. So he's already seems to have conceded defeat. I think one of the things that's been interesting for me to watch over the last couple months is to see live my Republican colleagues in Congress starting to come to the realization that Donald Trump does not give a damn about them. And the rest of the world knew that, right? Anyone who's ever met or worked with or engaged with Donald Trump knows that Donald Trump cares only about Donald Trump.
Right.
But some of the Republicans in Congress, most of the Republicans in Congress, have gone so far in their fealty to Donald Trump that they convinced themselves that Donald Trump was their friend and cared about them, or cared about their political future, or cared about the policy priorities that they have. And they're learning over the last couple of months, he doesn't give a damn about them. And I think you're going to see that continue to play out and his relationship with Republicans in Congress continue to unravel, perhaps in unexpected ways over the course of this year, and his power is waning by the day. That happens to any president. I think with Donald Trump, like anything, everything is kind of supercharged with Donald Trump. And I think his acceleration into lame duck status is going to be supercharged as well.
Yeah, I think you're right. And I think we're at some kind of an inflection point. And I point to Marjorie Taylor Greene, perhaps more than anything else, because I think she's a very shrewd, very crafty, calculating politician who has her finger on the pulse of MAGA and the Republican Party. And I also think she has a ton of political capital. And I just think her break with Trump should be taken as some kind of sign that she's seeing the future. And she's making that break now and getting ahead of it. I don't think, when I see people write her off, it's like, oh, she's terrified of Trump and her family and all that. That's not it. I think she sees the future for herself politically, but she also sees that being on that Trump-tanic as it's continuing to head for the iceberg is not the place to be.
Yeah, I think that's right. And I think you're starting to see, and this will also accelerate over the course of this year, kind of quiet, maybe sometimes not quiet, jockeying within the Republican Party, within MAGA, to try to define the post-Trump future, right? We see this in the debates between, Heritage and Ben Shapiro, and should, they defend Tucker Carlson's anti-Semitism or not, and how anti-immigrant should they be? All of those debates are now starting to play out in a public way as Trump's hold on the party, him being kind of the glue that has held this strange coalition together, starts to loosen a little bit. And I think Marjorie Taylor Greene is an example of that. The other thing, we've seen several of the women in the House Republican Conference, start to go in their own direction. We saw that on the Epstein files. We've seen that in some of them being vocal in their criticism of Trump and of Speaker Johnson. And they seem to be, I doubt it's a new realization for them, but they're now willing to vocalize that there's a lot of misogyny in House Republican Conference and, MAGA with Trump, and they're getting frustrated with that misogyny. And I think those voices will continue to be heard as well.
Yeah, and, you mentioned before the fealty of your Republican colleagues. Last weekend, we saw Donald Trump make a hideous comment about the murder of Rob Reiner and his wife, Michelle. Yeah. Are you surprised that you haven't seen more condemnation from that side of the aisle?
No. I wish I was surprised. And, I saw Speaker Johnson was asked about it and, said he hadn't heard it, or he doesn't comment on everything that everybody says. Of course, anytime a Democrat says something he doesn't like, he's happy to comment on it. It is a sad commentary on, I think, the state of the Republican Party, that they've just stopped voicing what I know many of them feel privately, which is, his rhetoric, Trump's rhetoric, is out of control and is disgusting. They just don't have the courage. They've just decided it's not worth it. There's nothing to be gained by speaking out. And, I'm somebody who kind of believes, I try to avoid moralizing. I don't think it's a great place for political leaders to be. But, our founders were very clear that for our project, our democratic project, to succeed, the virtue or some sense of virtue among our leaders was necessary to hold it all together. And Republicans have completely abandoned that. And that's a tragedy. I hope they find it, but they don't have it right now. They just don't have it.
Yeah, and the sad, chilling reality that I think Americans have to grapple with is that we have a sociopath in the White House, and that explains everything he does, everything he says. Congressman, thanks so much for coming on. Come back and chat with us again, and enjoy the holidays.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
All righty, take care. This episode was produced and edited by me, Andy Ostroy. It was co-produced by Matty Rosenberg and Jen Hammoud for Radio Free Rhinecliff, with additional editing by Matty Rosenberg, music by Andrew Hollander, and graphic design by Cricket Langell. And with a special thanks to our sponsor, The Epicurean. Again, thanks for listening. Please rate and review wherever you get your podcasts, and subscribe to the Backroom with Andy Ostroy YouTube channel, where you can watch full videos of our interviews. See you next time.